Hello, my fellow Americans and all you wonderful English speakers around the world. I'm in Brazil at the moment, and this is Holambra, a charming town in the state of São Paulo that is famous for its strong Dutch influence, colorful flowers, and peaceful atmosphere. The name Holambra comes from a combination of Holland, America, and Brazil. Many tourists visit the town to see its beautiful gardens, windmills, and flower farms. Every year, Holambra hosts Expo Flora, one of the largest flower festivals in Latin America. The city is also known for its delicious Dutch style pastries and traditional architecture. Thank you, Dutch people! Have you ever been to Brazil? I would love to hear where you visited and what your experience was like. So let me know in the comments below. Hello! Today I'll talk about a great German novelist, Nobel Prize winner, Thomas Mann, and how his book, The Magic Mountain, and one of its themes, the tension between faith and modernity, relate to the Bible verse that states, "Do not conform to the pattern of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind." I read this wonderful novel decades ago when I was very young and still lived in Brazil. And it follows a young man named Hans Castor who visits a tuberculosis sanatorium in the Swiss Alps and becomes deeply influenced by the intellectual debates around him. And through conversations between the different characters, the book explores the conflict between religious belief, human spirituality, scientific progress, and secular philosophy. Mann presents a world in which traditional faith is increasingly challenged by modern ideas, rationalism, and political ideologies, raising questions about whether humanity can preserve meaning and moral direction in an age shaped by science and change. And these are questions that many of us are interested in, I believe. And one of the things that I find absolutely fascinating about the Bible is that it addresses the most pressing matters of the human condition in a deeply relevant and timeless way. It never loses its power or influence when speaking about our nature, our needs, and our purpose in life. So, the fact that many of the characters in this book are ill and staying in a place of recovery makes us more aware of how physical weakness, especially when the prospect of death becomes imminent, often opens people more to spiritual reflection. And I believe that many people develop a greater curiosity about what comes after that because suddenly their world comes to a halt. And they realize that although they always knew death would eventually come, they don't feel prepared for it. And I believe this feeling of helplessness might draw us to something or someone who can transcend our mortality. And I read somewhere an observation about this theme, stating that this novel explores the reality of a world moving from a focus on faith and religion to a scientific modern world, and how neither fully satisfies us. To that, I say, it doesn't satisfy us if the faith centered worldview is just head knowledge. There's no personal, life changing, genuine connection to God. There's no intimacy. We don't feel known and seen and understood by Him. Then there's no sense of satisfaction. But when a genuine connection with God happens, the world makes perfect sense. And the result is the realization that suffering and physical death are not hopeless. And this happens because then we get the assurance that what happens in this world is not random, because there's something very unsettling and depressing about meaningless suffering. To believe that suffering has no meaning beyond its immediate impact is to surrender to a worldview confined entirely to the present moment. A mindset that says, let us eat and drink, for tomorrow we die. And when it comes to science, I don't know who came up with the idea that we have to choose between science and God, as if to say between reason and folkloric fairy tale nonsense. Because if you think about it, science explains the how and not the why. It explains processes, what is behind the scenes. For example, it explains the chemical reactions we undergo whenever we feel a strong emotion and we cry. But it doesn't explain why we have feelings to start with. Where do feelings come from? They come from chemical reaction. Yes, but what caused their reaction? Just because you can explain the effect, it doesn't mean that you can fully understand the cause. In other words, just because you can explain how a computer is made, for example, with all its components and functions, doesn't mean that you fully comprehend the mind of the person who had the idea and put all things together to make it work. And or worse, that because it works so effectively and beautifully, it must have come together on its own. Poof, there it is. So science can explain what God made. There is no conflict there, you see. So scientific explanation does not eliminate transcendence. Mechanisms do not negate meaning, and understanding processes does not necessarily remove the possibility of divine intention behind them. So today's Bible verse tells us, do not conform to the pattern of this world. In the context of the magic mountain, this pattern can be understood as the belief that death is the absolute end of our existence, with nothing beyond it. So the advisable thing to do would be to amass as many happy moments and accomplishments as possible, because once dead, we can't do anything anymore. But what a hopeless, shallow, and deeply depressing way to view life. It reduces human existence to mere survival and temporary gratification, as though we were no more significant than creatures driven only by instinct. But no, human beings were created with something far greater, the capacity to seek truth, to wrestle with meaning, to long for eternity, and to recognize a purpose beyond the limits of this world. The Bible calls us not to surrender to despair or to a worldview confined only to what is temporary and visible, but to live with the understanding that our lives carry eternal significance. Then we keep reading. Be transformed by the renewing of your mind. This means seeing and understanding both the world around us and the condition within us according to what our Creator, the one who knows all things, declares to be true and best, rather than allowing ourselves to be shaped by the ever-changing culture and belief systems of those around us. God, unlike the world, never changes. We're constantly listening to, observing, and consequently being shaped by the many prevalent thoughts of our time. But just as a lighthouse stands in the middle of the storm without being moved by the waves, the Christian should live in this world without being carried away by its waves. We stand firm, unwavering, as we walk by faith and by God-guided reasoning. So, whenever people like the characters in Thomas Mann's novel try to find meaning and moral direction in a world that is constantly growing, changing, and advancing in technology and science, while leaving God out of the equation, they go round and round like a spinning top that goes on spinning as long as the strength of the impulse that set it into motion allows it to go. It will eventually stop. If it doesn't spin fast enough, it will eventually fall. But if it is set into motion by supernatural strength, and if it follows all the laws of conservation of momentum or the like, it can spin indefinitely. So the conclusion of the matter is we can try to edit and revise God's perfect laws. We can reject them or even think we have better laws because we are so much more virtuous and intelligent than God Himself, of course. But all these things will ultimately fail and make us fall. But God's laws set us into motion in such a perfect way that nothing is able to stop us. Christ is the sustaining power that keeps our lives from collapsing into chaos. But the process of mind renewal is spirit led. We can't get there on our own, but we need to believe. And this belief, not only of the mind, but also of the heart, will lead to the decision to follow Jesus. And He will do the rest. And what is the result of this? The result is that we will be able to discern what is the will of God, what is good and acceptable and perfect. And then, as we read in Philippians, we will be blameless and innocent, children of God without blemish in the midst of a crooked and twisted generation, among whom we shine as lights in the world. Thomas Mann was perhaps asking the question, can we transcend the human condition? The answer is yes, through Jesus Christ, the only way